Hello everybody, so welcome back to another video. In this tutorial I'm going to teach you how to make this Kiri wrap shirt, and I'm also going to teach you how to make this KAZE wrap shirt. It is essentially a his and a hers drop that I'm doing for two sewing patterns that are available now when you're watching this video. Let me break it down to you. As always in these tutorials, it does not matter whether you have one of these domestic sewing machines or you have an industrial sewing machine like I do. Anybody can make these patterns. This is a level 3 out of 5, so it's for confident hobbyists, both of these. I'd say the KAZE shirt is more of a level 2 because it's kind of easier. However, if you've made a few garments through your journey and you kind of want to try something new, you're maybe thinking this looks a little bit complex, it's not. I'm going to take you through all the steps today so you can create this finished product. You can purchase this pattern on my website and it should look something a little bit like this right here. And then you can cut out, stick the pages together, and it should make a mess like this. All of them individual pieces that you've cut out all fit together. And with this fabric right here, you'll be able to create this piece of clothing right here, or this piece of clothing right here. Essentially, it's Christmas time, so I thought I'd release a pattern like this. It is basically a his and a hers, so it'll be a lovely little set to match. It'll be a great Christmas present to do together. An amazing system. I'm trying to release patterns every Friday at 6 PM, so I have an upload on YouTube here, and I have the patterns on my website. So yeah, let me break down the pattern for you. If you're brand new to my sewing patterns, once you download, print the pattern off my website, it should look something along the lines of this. Now you have A4, US letter, A0. They're just different formats of printing. A0 cuts out all of the sticking and cutting, just shoots you straight to the point of you being able to cut out your pattern pieces. A4 and US letter, basically they are the exact same thing, but just for different regions in the world. People print different paper. But anyway, let's get on to the main thing. Now you understand the different formats. On every starting page, it obviously has an image of what you're making, and then a 2x2 inch square, which you can measure to make sure that you've printed this correctly, because that is the main thing here. Once you open it up and go to the next page, there's a contents page, and then the page after that, you have the tools, materials, and hardware. For this, I'm making a small, so straight to materials. You can use something like a lightweight medium woven fabric. I am using 6-ounce denim. I got this from the local fabric shop for around £6 a meter, so super cheap. You're only going to need 1.7 meters at around 150, 160 centimeters width. I'm basically just going to recommend you get 2 meters at 160 centimeters width, and that will cover you for sure. You're going to need 4 to 6 buttons, because that's how we're going to attach this sort of wrap piece to the other side of the shirt. A few other different bits and bobs that you're going to need. And at the top, it obviously has your tools. So again, like I said earlier, domestic or industrial sewing machine, it does not matter at all. Denim needle if you have one, pins, clips, irons for pressing, tailor's chalk or a washable pen, and then ruler, seam ripper, but you can read this yourself. The next page is basically the print and assembly guide. It shows you visually what your assembly is going to look like once all the pages are stuck together. Now, I'm not going to show you how to sort of assemble the pages in this, because there is a full tutorial on my website where you can just watch the whole process, know exactly how to overlap the pages, and then how to cut out your desired size, how to make sure you're printing correctly. I won't mention that in here, so you can do that at a later date. After that, this is the pattern basics. This basically is on every one of my sewing patterns. So 1/4, 6 millimeters is what your sewing seam allowance is going to be on all my projects, unless stated different. Don't cut any extra seam allowance when cutting fabric. It's already included. So this basically means you need to cut directly along the page edge. Don't add any seam allowance when you're cutting your fabric. When you cut exactly on the line of your size, it represents perfectly what you should cut out of fabric. And then finally, there is a pattern icon glossary. This basically shows you all different things like grain line, notches, fold lines, cut to, mirrored, a lot of the terminology that I'm going to be using in this video. So I recommend once you get the pattern, I recommend you look through the pattern icon glossary. It does make sense. If you don't know what each of these things are, it will make sense for you. Then after that, it's all your pattern pieces, and then that is it. Let's get on to the tutorial. One quick thing I wanted to mention before we get on to the main tutorial is on your two front panels you have a dart, and once you've cut out your size, you basically just need to pay attention to these dart markings and make sure that you've cut out your dart on your piece of paper wherever it indicates to do so. Some people forget to do that, and then when it gets to doing the fabric, you're like, whoa, I've got to now cut out some darts. So yeah, make sure you do that now. Let's move on to cutting the fabric. So I hope all of that made sense. If it didn't by any chance, then you can head over to the Need Help page on my website, roughcutpatterns.com, which is where this pattern is going to be. On that page, there is basically everything you're going to need, all of the different things that could go wrong. It basically goes through them in depth, so you don't mess any of this up. What I'm going to do now is start cutting out my fabric, and then we're going to get to the main tutorial of putting all of this together and making this piece of clothing right here. Just before I do cut the fabric, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put all of the panels together which I need to combat first. So I'm going to put all of the different panels together which correspond with each other. I'm basically just going to categorize these and then put them in a line on the floor or on another table, wherever, just so I know what to grab next when I'm cutting out my fabric. If you're following correctly and you've just categorized all your panels, I'm basically going to cut out the back panel first. And as you can see, this is your center back, this is your side back panel here, and it says to cut two, so you want to be folding it and cutting on the fold. So for this, I'm going to start just with the side of the fabric and fold it over, and I'm going to cut two. I'm not going to mention this again, so whenever it says cut two mirrored, then you want to make sure you're doing that. There's only a few pieces in this pattern which actually say that, but just in case you get it wrong, when it says cut two mirrored, you essentially just want to cut on the fold. And that right there is the dart that I said to make sure you cut out of the paper and then cut out of the fabric. What we're going to do now is we're going to focus on our front panels first, and then we're going to move to the other front panel, the back panel, and then we'll do the sleeves. Then we'll sort of combine and put it all together. But I've got to take you through each step kind of slowly, because I do believe that if you don't sort of like pay attention, it could get quite confusing. Obviously this bit right here, this long strip, you don't specifically have to do it that way, and you could add like some kind of buckle at the back, which would probably minimize the amount of fabric that you're using. But this is the way I designed it. This is basically the tie that goes around the back. And when you tie it in a bow, it has that sort of feminine look to it. It cinches the whole shirt in. So as you can see, this is the front left, and then this is the front left wrap facing. We're going to sew this front facings to the front left panel. So you can see that if we then run some kind of iron down here, this becomes your facing. We want to turn this inside out and then top stitch it. And then this right here is your front left hem facing. This basically, once you've sewn that dart together, this basically just connects down the bottom just like that. And it should connect up perfectly, so then you can fold that over, iron it down. Then this is the inside of your left front piece. Now, I haven't added indications to it, but if you did want to add any type of welted pocket on the big panel on the front, the one that overlaps the other, it would be around this area right here. Now I think what I'm going to do is I am just going to add a little welted pocket up here, a small one, nothing too big. And then as you can see, if I grab my other front right panel, you can see that once they overlap, and you can see that a welted pocket would look really nice right there. So the steps that I would take to get this to the point where it's ready would be, I would focus on the welted pocket up here. I would sew the darts together, and then I would grab the inside facing to the wrap, sew it together, turn it inside out, top stitch it, and then make sure it connects nicely to the bottom hem facing here. Top stitch that, iron both the facings, and then you'd have a completed front left panel. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to talk you through the process, but that is essentially what you're going to do. I'm going to unpin all of these panels. I'm not going to show you how to do a welted pocket because there is a video on my YouTube specifically for that, and it would take up too much time in this video if I did show you how to do that. I just went and took a little food break, but I'm back now, and I just, before I went, finished the welted pocket here, and you can see underneath I've added the pocket bag, and I'm not too sure whether it's too close to the top of the dart, because now we're going to combat and sort of get to the dart. You're going to have to do this on the other side, which was the front right panel. Pretty much what we're going to do is we're just folding this over front facings, and we're just stitching this dart together. Let me put you on POV so you can fully see what I'm doing. You can kind of see that my pocket bag is a bit annoyingly in the way, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Just connecting up this dart here. Again, front facings, we're just going to stitch down this dart from the top. And as you can see, it's adding a little bit of volume just around this area here. I'm going to grab my iron, and I'm just going to iron this open. Just like that. And now what we're going to do, now we've just done the dart, is you could flip one of the panels to the side and hit this with a decorative top stitch all the way up or down, or go halfway. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to grab our wrap facing, and we might as well do this now whilst we're here. And then I'm going to hit it with a stitch all the way up to the top there. Going to hit it with a stitch and then turn it inside out. And then we're going to press it with our iron and then hit it with a top stitch. So as I just said, this right here is the facing. So when we turn this inside out, you'll be able to see that you can press it and it'll be the same on both sides. But to be able to turn this inside out, as you can imagine, might be a little bit of a pain with how long and thin this strip is here. So what I'm going to do is feed a little bit of string just through here, and then I'm literally just going to pull it all the way through when it's all sewn together, and then I can unstitch. So I'm going to pin all of this to the garment, going round. So as you can see, we're right at the end of the wrap. So I'm just going to thread this little bit of string. So in my case, I'm using this paracord, but loads of different people have different ways of doing this. You don't have to do it my way. I'm just going to stitch over this paracord and then just carry on with the stitch round as normal. Just make sure the paracord stays inside your wrap. And then what you can do here is you can put your hand in the wrap bit. Somewhere, there it is. And then we can literally hold the paracord from inside, and we should be able to just pull this through. Just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press all this down and then give it a top stitch. And I think that that is looking really clean now. You can see it's all been pressed, and now I'm going to top stitch this. I just unpicked that bit of paracord, I took it out, and now I'm just going to top stitch back over that. Just make sure you clean up any excess threads, just like that. You can just pinch them in a little bit and throw a pin right where they were. And we're just going to do a careful top stitch all the way around this. A little bit later, I'm going to be adding my buttons to this. And this is kind of down to you what you want to do. You could do some buttonholes on here and add buttons on the exterior, the sort of right panel. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some loops onto this, and then I'm going to add buttons onto the right panel and sort of have it so it hooks in with these loops. So I'm going to undo the top stitching that I'm about to make just to add them later. But for now it's fine, so we're going to carry on as normal. I'm just going to top stitch all the way around this, all the way around, all the way up to the top. So now we've top stitched all of that, it looks really, really nice. And what I'm going to do next is focus on this bottom hem facing. When we place it inside, we can see that the facing of the wrap actually comes down to the point where we don't need all this excess fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chop all of this off, but I'm going to leave like 1/4 inch from this line right here on the right side. So I'm going to cut it around there, just so it overhangs a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I am going to top stitch front facing that down to here, and then when we flip it this way, we can then top stitch it and then connect it all up. And then once we've connected it all up, we can top stitch all the way down here, and then we can iron all of this down. I'm actually going to undo a tiny bit of this top stitching here, and the reason I'm doing so is just so I can top stitch and turn this hem so we can top stitch it all together. So what I'm going to do, I've just unpinned a little bit of that top stitching. I'm actually going to flip it, and because it doesn't have the top stitching in, we can do the front facings so that hem can travel all the way along and connect up perfectly to that end. We're going to hit that with a stitch all the way along, turn it inside out, iron it, and then carry on that top stitch again all the way around the bottom of this panel. And there we have it. That right there is your finished left panel with its dart. I did the welted pocket, and then the whole top stitched wrap that we are going to wrap round the right side of our body. So it'll sit something like that. We're going to move this to the side for now. We're going to come back to that later. Now we're going to focus on the right side. And it has a lot of the same sort of techniques. You can see this front center right facing just stitches down to the center front, and then you just turn it inside out, top stitch it down. You've got another dart here, like just the exact same as the one we just did. And then again, you're connecting up your front facing again, and that should connect up perfectly. And if not, do the exact same thing and trim a little bit of the fabric, top stitch it, turn it inside out, carry on the top stitch down. So I'm going to POV this, but I'm probably not going to talk much, just the exact same procedure as what we just did for the last panel. I've realised that I've messed something up here. If you look from above, you'll see that the left panel wrap goes over the right. And for us to be able to incorporate the right wrap going over the left, it needs to be integrated into this dart. However, I got a tiny bit confused and assumed that it was going in the other dart. So let me just show you what that panel would be from above. I'll hook the camera up and just explain it to you where I went wrong and where you shouldn't go wrong. I messed up, you shouldn't. Sorry about that, it happens. It's my own pattern and I'm messing up. So to explain what's going on here, obviously this wrap comes around this side and then you need a wrap that comes around the other side. So the panel that you're gonna need is exactly this one right here. And this panel here is gonna integrate right into that dart, and then it's gonna act the same as this side, so then you can tie them around your back. The way I'm gonna correct this is I'm just gonna take all the pins out of this panel here. I'm gonna do the same where I stitch all the way around it, add that paracord in, pull it inside out, hit it with an iron, do the top stitching, and then I'm just gonna unpin this dart and I'm gonna place this panel in, and then I'm gonna stitch it back up, and then that should be the thing corrected. And just like that, we are back to exactly where we need to be. That was kind of just a little mistake from me. I don't know why I didn't think to put the wrap within that dart, but I kind of got confused. If you get confused the exact same as me, just take it slow, as I normally say. These videos are me just like breaking down exactly how to make a garment, but I'm inevitably gonna mess up now and again. So yeah, they're the two wraps on the front panel. And now I'm gonna put this whole front panel to the side, and we're gonna focus on the back panel. That requires 3 pieces. It also has a hem facing at the bottom. I'm going to show you what they are now. Right here I am looking at the back panels that we just cut out, and as you can see we cut out 2 of these side panels. What we're going to do is we're just going to unpin this, and we're just going to flip one of these panels over here, and as you can see that will slowly make your back. And then we are going to top stitch and stitch them together, and then this right here, this is your back hem facing. So then that just runs all along the bottom the same way we did before, where we literally just stitch it down and then top stitch it, and then there we have it. I'm also going to add a little chalk mark where that center back neck reference notch is, just for when we're making the collar. Just like that, you can see we can flip this panel over, and then that makes our back. Obviously when you sew these together it has volume to it because all of the inside edges, they are curved, which helps the volume and the shape of this overall piece. So we're just going to top stitch both these panels together. I'm going to run the top stitches so they fold under and outwards, so then it looks like both these panels are facing in the middle. And that right there is your back panel. What we're going to do is we're going to grab our back hem facing, and we're literally just going to stitch it down so it matches from one side to the other. As you can see, it does there perfectly. But we're not going to top stitch this one, and we might end up having to unpick the top stitch of the other ones on the front. This is only because when we end up sewing the side seams together on the front and the back, we want to sew the hems together too. So the side of this back hem facing is going to match with the front left, for example, facing. So we're just going to stitch this down, and then I'm going to iron it round, but we're not going to run a top stitch through it because we might need to straighten it out, and then we can run a top stitch afterwards. So we've just sewn together this back piece right here, and we've ironed down that hem. We also could add an iron sort of fold along the hem, but I'm going to leave that and do that a little bit later. We're going to move the back of the shirt out the way, and we're going to put it just to the side for now with the front panels. And we're just going to focus on these sleeves. If you've done it correctly, you should have cut out 2 of these and 2 of these. When I remove the paper, you can see that I've got 2 of the sleeves, and they are slightly different, so make sure you're cutting them mirrored, as gradient to the sleeve cap is slightly different both sides. They're not the exact same from left to right. So we basically need to make sure that we're cutting that mirrored, otherwise this shirt won't have the right fit. We can move the paper to the side. We are focusing on just right now doing the same procedure where we're just stitching our hem facings down, and then we're ironing them back on themselves. So don't top stitch, just leave them how they are. The way we're going to construct this shirt right now, if I can explain it in the most simple and easy way, is we're going to connect the shoulders of the shirt up, and then we're going to do the collar. And then once the shoulders are connected, and because the collar is connected, we can then focus on the sleeves, and I'll show you a new technique that I haven't actually shown you on this account yet. So you've got your back panel here. All you're doing is you are literally just placing the front facings of your front side panel just with the front facing of your side back panel. And as I mentioned earlier, you have probably top stitched the bottom of your front panels the same as me. All you can do just for now is to hit a little blade through that. And just like that, it opens it up again. And what we're going to do now, as I mentioned, you just throw in the front facings together, and then you just want to pin all the way down this side seam, all the way with the, make sure your hem is together too, and you should be able to match it up perfectly with that corner. But make sure these are the front facings again. I'm just going to throw a horizontal pin along the hem. Because what we're going to do here is we're going to stitch all the way along the hem, up the side panel, back and forth stitch on that corner, and then we're actually going to top stitch this down, and then we're going to just fold this hem back up and then just re-top stitch it the same as we did before. Now you can see that I just top stitched all the way down that hem right here along that side panel. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to turn it outside in, the other way around even. I'm going to iron all of this, and then we're basically going to remake that bottom fold of the hem, make it super clean, and then we're going to fold this over too again. So we're basically just carrying on that hem along from the back and the side, and then just doing and redoing our top stitches. For now, before we do that, I'm just going to iron this down to make it nice and clean. If I look at this from a top-down view, you can see that I have literally just done exactly what I said I wasn't going to do. I said we were going to focus on the shoulders first, but I've actually just gone ahead and literally just stitched down the side panel out of habit, because I'm so used to doing the armholes after and putting them inside out. It's not a problem, we can do it this way. I wanted to show you a new technique, but I'll show you that new technique later on in the second tutorial. What I'm going to do here is there is a lot of yellow top stitching going on, so I'm not actually going to top stitch up this because I already have 2 panels here which are top stitched. I want to kind of keep the consistency of the denim without just throwing loads of top stitches in it. What I'm going to do now is I am literally going to do the exact same thing with the other side panel. I'm just going to connect up that corner at the top, throw a pin in it, and then the same with this bottom hem on the front, which I did before. I'm going to undo that top stitching. There you go, undo that top stitching, clean it up a little bit. The same with what we just did. I'm going to run all the way down through that hem. So just this hem at the bottom and that corner, I'm just going to stitch all the way down. Right now, this right here is what we're working with. And if we flip this side over, connect up the shoulders, do the exact same with the other side, you can now slowly see that this is starting to take place. You pretty much just need to do the collar and then we're getting there. Yeah, this is really starting to take place. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do what I said I was going to do earlier, and that is the same as what we did with our side seams, and that is stitch this front facing with this, and then do the exact same there where we're doing front facings together, stitching the shoulders, and then we're going to combat the zip together. After we've combat the zip, then we're going to do the arms, and then I'm going to focus on how I'm going to do this little detachable sort of button system right here. So yeah, right now let's focus on the shoulders, then the collar, and then we'll move on. Right, so now I'm going to take you through the full process of doing a collar, specifically a collar with a stand. And this can seem quite daunting, just take it super slow. I'm basically going to explain it from start to finish, and at the end you'll have a super nice collar. We can move the stand out the way for a second, and we're just going to focus on this piece. You should have your two front facings together if you've cut on fold, as you should have. And what we're going to do is we're going to run a stitch all the way around this, not stitching the bottom of it, and then we're going to turn it inside out, right side's facing up, and then we're just going to iron it and then hit a top stitch all along it. That is what we're going to do here. We don't need to do anything else. Let's take this slowly. I just marked that notch in the top collar, and I'm going to do the same right here. As you can see, just two notch marks. And what we're going to do here is we basically do know that the top of this collar is basically going to sit in this stand. Once you mark the notches up perfectly, you can see that it will work. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take the bottom one, going to remark them notches in, and we're just going to place it on top. And you can add interfacing to your fabric. I'm not doing that in this case because it's just denim and it will flow, and I don't really want to, but you can if you choose to. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to match up that middle point notch with the middle notch in the collar, and I'm going to get a pin and I'm going to throw it in and match it with the bottom collar stand too. What I'm going to do is visually you can see that now when it's all connected, the base idea is that we're going to sew along the collar stand, along the collar, and then when you turn it inside out, they'll be connected. But what you want to do with one of your collar stands is you basically just want to do a 1/4 inch sort of fold, and I'll show you why you're doing this later. But for now, just run that little fold. Run that fold along the bottom of the collar stand, just like that. And you only want to do that for one of the collar stands, not both of them. As I said, I'll show you why in a minute. And again, we're sandwiching this top collar piece in between the collar stand. And if you iron off your wax, throw down the collar stand paper and just mark the notch again. Now what we're going to do is we are going to throw a pin in this to match all of this together, and then slowly just work your way around and add pins. That top collar piece in between one of the folded stands and one of the unfolded stands right there. What we're going to do is we're going to do a really close stitch all around this where you've pinned. And then essentially what we're basically going to do is we're going to attach the side which hasn't been folded to the shirt. And then once we've turned this inside out, pressed it, top stitched the stand to the collar, this should then fold nicely over, naturally fold nicely over, and then we can stitch it down to the shirt. So let's do one step at a time, and let's just stitch this down and then turn it inside out and then hit it with the iron. Now what we can do is we can bring it back, and what we can do is the seam that we've just made, we can just iron that seam all the way around. Now we've ironed that down, we can now see that naturally that fold wants to sit right on that stitch line. So now we're going to just make sure that this collar piece, this folded collar stand piece, just slightly goes over the yellow stitching and covers it up. And then we're going to place some pins slowly along, just like that. You can see that they line up perfectly on the back side, so they don't fall onto the back or the front panel.
Is it on the green thing?
We finished pinning all of that. We now want to stitch along a really close top stitch all the way down there. And there we have it. That is your final collar with its collar stand, and I think it looks really, really nice. I think I could probably clean up a little bit of the stitching underneath, but I will do that off camera. We can kind of see the sort of shape of this taking place, and I think it looks really, really nice. I personally find it really hard with stuff like this because I'm not a female. Building female patterns, I can't just try it on afterwards and be like, this looks sick. So I've kind of got to get someone to try it on for me. I'm making this again for my girlfriend Sam. She was in the previous video, and yeah, she's gonna love this, and it's made in her size, so she'll be able to model this. I can't model this, but if you wanted to model this and you were a guy that was a bit structurally more built, then obviously this is graded up to a big size, so you can make this. It's just a feminine sort of style, but it's still technically unisex. I've done small sizes, we've done big sizes, so anyone can wear this. But obviously I'm doing his and hers, so there's a male one and there's a female one, but it's up to you which one you want to wear. As I mentioned, it's really starting to take place now. I like the look of this collar. The collar's turned out super, super nice. I'm gonna move on to the sleeves right now. I made this for my girlfriend Sam. She's gonna model this tomorrow. But for now, let's move on to the sleeves. These right here are your two sleeve panels, and I'm gonna show you what to do with them. Essentially, we can move one to the side, and whatever we do to the current one here, we're gonna do to the other panel is gonna be reflected. You're basically gonna do everything on this panel, and you're gonna just do it again for this panel because they are the exact same pattern piece, just for the other arm. So we're gonna open up that seam that we just did, and we're basically gonna fold front facings together, and we're just gonna connect these two side seams down here. But we're gonna connect them all the way up to the end of the hem that we have just ironed together. We're gonna sew round this, making sure that all of our seams are pressed down, so we're not sewing over bulks of fabric that shouldn't be sewn down. And we're basically just gonna stitch down this, turn it outside in, and run a top stitch all the way down. Then we're gonna turn that hem back on the inside, and it should be all connected up. And then we're basically going to run a top stitch all along the hem, just so it cleans it up a little bit. So let's do that.
Is good for
Now we have sewn the two sleeves together. You can see that when you straighten and sit that seam flush with the other, you can see the shape on the cap of the sleeve. It has more fabric on one side than it does on the other. This is because the piece with more fabric on sits just behind, and then the piece with less fabric sits on the front. This is just because your back obviously has. Now we have just finished the sleeve. Let me just explain something to the best of my ability. Probably not to the best of my ability, but I'll explain it anyway. When we connect up these two sleeves perfectly flush right there, you'll see that there is a little bit more fabric on one of the sides of the arm cap. And that is because when you place this on, no matter whether it is a guy or girl's pattern, you're going to need more fabric on the back of your sleeve. The mic is getting covered. And that is because you tend to move your arms forward. So basically, the side with more fabric has to go on the back. So it needs to be facing the back. I don't know if I've explained that well, but basically we're going to make sure now that when I place that down, back of the sleeve has more fabric, and the same with the other side. And now we know that these sleeves match up perfectly there. So what I'm going to do, turn the jacket inside out, and you can triple check. This right here is the back of the shirt. So I basically, when I flip it over, the back is on the back side now. I basically just want to grab the sleeve that matches front facings, and I just want to put it inside. I didn't want to do this like this technique. I wanted to do it a different way, but here we are. And just like normal, let me switch you to POV. This sleeve is now threaded just through the inside of the shirt. And you can see that now we can do the normal technique of matching the bottom seam of the arm sleeve with the side seam of the jacket, or in this case shirt. We're just going to throw a pin in there, and then what we're going to do is we're going to work a stitch all the way around this, making sure that that seam matches up. We're going to just work a stitch all the way around this sleeve. It's quite a small armhole. It is a very, very small armhole, so you shouldn't really need too many pins. I'm actually not going to do this with pins. I know it matches up perfectly, so I am literally just going to sew all around it. Once you turn this back the other way and pull it through, you can see that that sleeve right there has been sewn down. And I kind of like that ballooned sleeve, so I don't know whether I want to even top stitch it down, because it kind of looks cool like that. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to sew the other sleeve in, and then we're pretty much done. It's just attaching the buttons and then just checking over it, maybe adding a bit of a cleaner stitch onto this. And then yeah, we have a finished wrap shirt pattern. So let's do the other sleeve. And there we have it. That is the Kiri wrap shirt. I can't wear it myself because it's not my size, but I'm going to overlay a load of clips here. And I'm going to overlay a load of clips over me so you can see exactly what it fits like on Sam, my girlfriend. And that is her version, the female version of the wrap shirt. And now I'm going to construct the KAZE wrap shirt, which is the men's version of the wrap shirt. So as I mentioned, I'm doing a his and a hers. If you have just come to this timestamp of how to build this shirt, I'm not going to go through any of the, what's in the pattern, all of this sort of stuff. That's all at the beginning of the tutorial. So now I'm going to start off with my KAZE pattern already cut out, and I'm going to show you how, forgot that was on. I'm going to show you how to exactly sew the whole thing together. I'm expecting you to know how to put the pattern together. So yeah, let's move on from the Kiri wrap shirt to the KAZE wrap shirt. And I'm going to show you how to fully complete it. And at the end of this video, I'm not sure how far through we are right now, and at the end of this video we should have a 2 set of wrap shirts. Let's do it. Hello everybody, so it is a brand new day. I've got my coffee, and essentially today we are going to tackle the KAZE men's wrap shirt. And yesterday in the video, or I don't know if I've split this up into 2 videos, I don't think I have, but if I have, then in the previous video / yesterday's part of the video, we made the Kiri wrap shirt, which is this one. There's a lot of light, but it's this one right here. And it is the female version of the male shirt that we are going to construct today. This shirt is kind of a little bit easier than the Kiri shirt to construct, but I've still put it as a 3 in skill level, just mainly because I want to make sure that the people that are jumping into this project, if there is any part of this tutorial that they didn't understand, then they can still construct this in their own way. Today I'm going to be making this in a large, however it is graded from extra small all the way up to XXL. So there is a massive size range. Let me just show you the pattern. This right here is the KAZE shirt pattern. This right here is the pattern that you will download and print off in the correct format for your region. There is A4, there is US letter, and then there is also A0 if you cannot be bothered to tile all the pages together. I'm going to very briefly take you through this process, and then we're going to jump straight into the tutorial. I'm not going to teach you how to tile the pages together because there is a video right here on my website that will show you exactly how to do that. This, as I said, is a skill level 3. It is graded extra small, small, medium, large, XL, XXL. It has a photo preview of what you'll create, plus a 2 by 2 inch square that you can measure. And if this is incorrect, you have printed it wrong. If this is correct, you have printed it correctly. You have a contents page, you have tools, materials, and hardware. You have a fabric size table for which size depending. Tools, domestic or industrial sewing machine. As I always mention with these projects, you don't need a industrial sewing machine like I have. You can just use a domestic. Denim needle for your sewing machine, standard presser foot plus like a buttonhole foot if you have one on your domestic. Fabric scissors, rotary cutter. An iron is important with this project. Tailor's chalk, just the normal sewing tools. And now materials. So you can use like a mid-weight cotton, a denim, a linen, some kind of hemp blend might be cool, some sort of structured but breathable sort of fabric, because we're making this into a kind of summer shirt. Lining is optional. I don't provide the lining panels. However, you'll be able to figure it out if you've got to the point where you can either use your facing or your lining. It's pretty much using the same panels you've already cut out and just reflecting them onto your lining and then stitching it together the same and then turning it inside out a certain way. But I'm not going to teach you that today. We're just going to create the base level of the KAZE shirt. Interfacing for the collar, you don't necessarily need to do this, and I won't be doing this. Hardware, so 5 to 7 buttons. You're going to be using around 3 or 4, depending on if you're doing it this way or adding hardware. And then that is everything. I always recommend that 2 meters at 160 or 150 centimeters wide is normally the best thing to go for if you're doing shirts or jackets. This is the print and assembly guide. So this is a map of how your pages should be stuck together. I'm not going to show you how to do that today, but again, it's important to make sure you're printing on the right size paper. You're also printing at 100% scale, otherwise your pattern won't come out correctly. And then there is a little tutorial down here of how you should stick your pages and what order they should go. Sticking guide, double check before sticking. Obviously you need to make sure that your pages overlap. Now, pattern basics. Every one of my sewing tutorials and sewing patterns is stitched at a 1/4 seam allowance, which is 6 millimeters. And don't add seam allowance, do not add seam allowance when cutting, it's already included. So cut directly on the edge of the paper. When you've laid your paper pattern on top of your fabric and you're cutting out your pattern, cut directly along your paper's edge. You have measurements for each size. I'm gonna overlay this on the screen so you can see this. One thing that's really cool about the measurements is we've provided every single measurement for every single size. So if you wanted to make a custom size and you were sort of wanted it to be a bit more tailored to your fit, then you could follow the, for example, the medium size, but then you could cut into the large size, and then say your body was made a certain way, you could cut into this small size and then back to medium for something else. So pretty much you have all of these measurements and all of these sort of numbers, and you can cut this garment exactly to how it fits you. Finally, there is a pattern glossary. This basically goes through all the indications that are on this pattern. It goes through everything you'll need to know to be able to read and understand this pattern. So if you are new to patterns, that is completely fine. This basically breaks down everything that is within this pattern booklet, and it helps you understand everything. You have grain line, notches, you know, pleats, fold lines, cut to mirrored, which is one bit of terminology that we're going to be using a lot in this video, pocket placement, buttons, welted pockets, but I'm not going to go through what they are. You can read this yourself. And then from here, the pattern starts, and this is the stuff you'll be tiling. And that is it. We're going to basically detach these pages from the actual pattern itself. And then there is a few pages at the back that is important to read too, but I won't go over them right now. But again, we're going to just detach them from the actual pattern itself, and then we're going to start sticking them together. I'm going to come back to this tutorial once I have finished sticking all the pages together. If you're unsure how to do this, again, there is a full video, full explanation on my website under the Need Help page. You can go over there, follow that, and you'll make sure you do it correctly.
Literally thousands of square feet, living, breathing. Lack of disease resistance.
Now we have finished cutting out all of the panel pieces, I have just categorized them into different sections. So we have the sleeve, the back panel, all the front panels, and then we have the collar over here. Basically what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to follow the indications on the pattern pieces, i.e. here it says cut to mirrored, and you want to be careful with things like the sleeve, mainly because there is different beziers and curves on either side, left and right. So you need to make sure that you are actually cutting them mirrored, otherwise your sleeves are going to come out a little bit odd. So yeah, make sure that you're following the indications where it says to cut 2 and where it says to cut 1. And right now I'm just going to cut out all the fabric, and then we'll start sewing the front piece, move on to the back piece, do the sleeves, do the collar, connect it all together, and then we'll have a finished KAZE wrap shirt. Let's do it. With the mix of fabrics, I sort of blended both the 6 ounce with the 8, and I'm sorry if you can hear the iron in the background. My iron's kind of broken, it just goes all the time. Anyway, the mixture of the 6 ounce denim and the 8 ounce denim is what I am using here. So I've cut out all the panels, all the sleeves, I cut out all the things mirrored, I cut out all the back, and I have loads of excess fabric left. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start laying out the back panels just so you have a full understanding of what's going on here. I'm going to sew the back panels first, then move on to the front. I decided to do it this way just because I think it's the easiest for you to understand. I'm just going to set up my machine now and just get the right sort of colour thread that I want, and then we'll move on to stitching and actually getting this whole shirt together. Let me explain exactly what's going on with the back panel so you know exactly what you're doing here. You've got 3 different panelled pieces. They all create your main back panel. You also have these 2 shoulders, but we'll talk about them in a second, and you've got this bottom hem of your back panel. We're going to move that to the side and just explain how to do these three, and then we'll integrate the other three panels in. So you want to run a 1/4 seam allowance, and you basically want to sew all three of these panels together exactly where they match up. Then you want to press down your seams. Then you just want to run a top stitch through everything you've just sewn. After you've done that, you should have one main big back panel. Then you want to reintroduce these two shoulders. Again, 1/4 seam allowance, then top stitch them down. This will create your main back panel, and this will be pretty much your back panel finished. Then we want to grab this right here, which is your facing, your hem facing of the bottom of the back panel. We're going to connect that up by sewing that on and then ironing it down so they're back facing. But we don't want to do a top stitch on the bottom of here. The reason we don't is because when we get to constructing the whole garment together, all of the hems should connect up, and then we are going to top stitch the whole of the hems and every bit to make it clean at the end. So for now, let's just focus on stitching these three panels together and then integrating them to shoulder seams afterwards. And then we'll get to stitching the hem on and then ironing it down. Throughout this video, I'm going to be swapping from POV on my hat and swapping to angles like you just saw. I'm just going to try keep it as simple and as easy for you to know and basically follow exactly what I'm doing. So let's do it. Finally, I'm just going to mention a little pro tip. If you've got any sort of labels or any sort of masking tape, just like I do back here, or you've got any sort of masking tape, a good pro tip is to basically label your pattern pieces if you get confused. So as you're taking the paper off your pattern pieces, you can pretty much just label it exactly what it's called on the actual paper pattern itself. This is going to help you because when I'm explaining what panel I'm working on, you can basically just find that easily and you won't get too confused and sew the wrong pieces together. I'm not going to do that in this video. You'll be able to see what shapes I'm picking up and sewing, but it is just a pro tip that could also help you as well. So let's get to sewing. And the thing I really like about this paneling of this back piece is this middle panel sort of cuts up really nicely, and you can kind of put whatever fabric you want on this middle piece. I thought it would look really nice if it looks like this lighter denim is sort of like layering over the main panels, which are obviously these heavier denim pieces. But with this pattern, obviously you can do whatever, get whatever fabric you want. Lighter fabric works amazing. And I'm just so excited to see what the builds are with these shirts because they are genuinely just so fun to make. I'm going to attach these shoulders right now, and then once they're on, I'm going to top stitch them down. I'm going to top stitch them flowing this way so it looks like the shoulders are overlapping. I think that will look really nice. And I'm just testing to see if they're going to match up, which they do perfectly. Then we'll get onto the hem. And that right there is your finished panelled back piece. And as I said, you could like even add loads of sashiko details just on this middle piece. The way I've built this pattern is so obviously it's fully customizable. This is a shirt, so as I just mentioned, you know, that lighter fabric is super nice. I'm making this in denim. I'm actually making a medium. I normally fit like a large or an XL, but I kind of wanted this to be like quite fitting to the body, so I'm making a medium. But anyway, now let's sew the front sides together, just on the bottom. We're going to do the 1/4 seam allowance and then we're going to iron it down, but we're not going to top stitch this. We're just going to leave it ironed down for now. All of the facings, whether it's the hem facings or the center front facings, I'm just going to do a little 1/4 inch fold on the facing, because when it obviously turns over, you just want it to be super clean on your garment. So I am not adding lining to this piece. I'm just going to do it so it is like a nice single layered denim asymmetric Japanese inspired shirt. But what I would say is if you're not lining, remember all of these edges are going to be loose. So what you can do when you're doing all your top stitching and stuff is you can either bind your edges with some bias tape, or you can hit it with the overlocker. My overlocker is broken, so I'm just going to make sure that I'm cleaning up all the faces with a little 1/4 inch fold. So now you can see that we have our back panel completely finished. I'm really liking the look of this. You've got the facing, which is folded over, all your seams top stitched. This is looking really, really nice. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this to the side and we're going to start focusing on the front panels. I've got all my front panels. It might seem a little bit confusing to you because there's so much of it again, but what I'm doing is I am literally pins out, and where it says front left here, it could say front right. I'm just moving it to the corresponding side, so left side, right side. Now that you have everything left and right side, let me show you exactly what we're doing. This is the front right side. This is where all your buttons are going to connect up to. So if I take this away, you'll see that we have the right facing, which is essentially going to go right down this line right here, and that is going to go on the inside the same way we just did the hem. And then we have this right here, which is your hem facing, and that would connect up on the inside to your front facing. And this panel has the wrap over it, so the wrap should like travel just right down here. And we're not going to do too much to this panel. I want to keep it kind of simple, but it also comes with a shoulder piece too, so we can move one of these to the side for the right side, and then one of these sits right there perfectly. And again, the wrap is going to come over, so we can kind of leave this little section clean. That is exactly how the right side works. I'm just going to put all these pieces together and explain to you the left side. This right here is the left side, and this is actually the fun side, because we have a little fun new technique that I'm going to show you. I'm going to teach you how to make a really cool pocket. We have the inside facing. This is going to clean up the inside of your wrap when you're opening it, and it's again going to connect to the bottom facing here. We might have to trim this down a little bit, but it's going to look really nice. So we've got your hem facing, and you've got your center front wrap facing right there. And again, you have another shoulder piece right there. But something you have that is a little bit different about this panel is you have this front pocket placement here. What I'm going to do with this panel is add a few little details. On the side, you should have a panel just like this. This is your top pocket panel. This is going to go right here, and it's basically, if I can move this out of the way, it's going to sit right there. And I'm going to show you a little fun technique to put a really nice sort of pocket onto the front of this garment. I'm also going to do a little welted pocket up here, but I'm not going to show you in the video how I'm actually stitching that together, because if you would like to know, there is a full tutorial on my YouTube to how to do a welted pocket. So when I do add the welted pocket, you can pause this video, head over to the welted pocket video, follow along with that, and then come back to this video. But I'm not going to be including it in this video because it would make the video too long. I'm going to teach you how to do this specific pocket right here, and then we will move on to doing the welted pocket, adding the facings, connecting the shoulder, and then we'll move on to the other side. The first thing you want to do is understand that this panel right here needs to have added seam allowance when cutting your fabric. I cut it out earlier, but I just kind of realized what sort of pocket we're doing, and we're basically cutting 2 of them. So what we want to do is we want to allow a 1/2 inch seam allowance on 2 pieces of fabric. So for example, I'm going to cut one out of my heavier denim, and then I'm going to cut one out of my lighter denim too. This panel right here is basically your template panel. You're going to cut 2 pockets with seam allowance, 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then this right here is going to be your template pocket. Right here we have markings on our front pocket placement here. We're going to correspond this panel with our markings, so mine would sit right there, and we're just going to remove this pattern piece away and line up exactly where we want this pattern piece to go. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a fabric marker right now, and I am basically just gonna draw around this pattern piece right here. Once you've drawn around your pattern piece, you should have a perfect sort of replication of this template piece above right here. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut 2 of these pattern pieces out of fabric, but again, remember that 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. I think it's easier for me to put you on my head so you can fully understand exactly what I'm doing here. So now we have cut out one of our pieces of fabric with our template pocket piece. I'm just going to draw around this template piece again. So now you have marked that pocket, you can take the template off and it should look something a lot like this. And what you've done now is you have basically just created the inside for this pocket right here. What I'm going to do is I thought I was going to cut it out of my heavier fabric, but I think it's going to make the process a little bit harder and less malleable. So I think I'm going to put the heavier fabric away. And I'm going to use this pocket and the exact shape and seam allowance of this pocket right here. I'm going to use it to cut out a second panel the exact same. And now what you're doing is you're taking that pocket template again and you're just placing it right on top, and we're drawing around it once more. And also we're going to flip the panels and we're going to do the exact same markers on the back. So now both sides of the pockets should have marked seam allowance. Now I'm going to take you over to the sewing machine and I'm going to explain what the hell is going on here. We have 2 of these panels and the exact replicated template marker on the actual wrap piece itself. Before we move to the sewing machine, I'm just going to grab another bit of fabric real quick. We've got these 3 templates right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to place one down, and what we're doing is we're creating the hem facing for one of the pockets. We don't need to do it to the other, but just one of them. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to stitch along the top of this chalk line here, and then I'm going to cut all of this out, cut the remnants out, and then do the flip iron. Let me show you. So I'm just going to stitch along this wax line here, and we're just going to cut. Now we have just created a little facing for the pocket, which is going to be on the outside. I'm just going to press this. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch fold. One more fold, just like that. Now you've just created this top pocket hem. And if you're using something like wax and hitting it with an iron, you might lose your lines. But right there, that is your top hem. So let's go over to the sewing machine. So you've now got one piece which has been hemmed, and you've also got one piece that hasn't. And then you've got your main indication template layer here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit this with 2 stitches, one right on the top, and then one just at the bottom. So it should look something like that. This is going to be the pocket once we've finished sewing it together. But we're basically creating a sort of pocket in this panel which doesn't have any top stitching around it, and it's going to look super clean once it's sewn together. So we want to throw the hemmed piece just to the side for now, and we want to grab the piece that hasn't been hemmed. And what we're going to do is we're just going to match up, if you can imagine it like this, we're just going to flip it over and match these lines just like this, and then we're going to stitch just around this top line here. So it should look something along the lines of that. And then you should have a little bit of excess on one side and excess on the other. Don't stitch all the way to the raw edge of the sides of your pocket. Now what we can do is we can basically lift up the bottom, or should I say the top of this top pocket. Just fold it over. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow this side round, front facing, so the line matches up all the way round. And this is going to get quite tricky in a minute because it's quite fiddly, but this is going to look really, really nice. So we're just going to slowly follow this line all the way around. And the reason we made this line on the outside and the inside is because this line on the inside of your fabric is your guide for your sewing, and this line on the outside is your guide for matching up, as you can see the line. What we're going to do just to make this easier for us is we are going to grab our scissors, wherever they are. We're just going to make a little incision in the center of the fabric. Now we are going to snip all the way up to the corner piece right there. And we're going to do the exact same where we're going to snip all the way up to the corner piece. Just like that. You should have a little triangle now. And we're pretty much just going to do it all the way down, but not on this one. We're not going to go right to the line. Just about a 1/4 inch away. Going to do another one. And then right now we should have this opening right here. If you're a tiny bit confused about what we're doing, hold with me. The reason we just cut this open is so we can make it easier to sew round whilst we're doing it right now. As awkward as this might be, you've got all of this right here. We're basically just going to stitch all around this line right here and correspond it with this line right here. And right now you can see that when this part is folded over again, this should match up perfectly. Hit a little back and forth stitch on the top of that facing, and then we can kind of take our needle out of the fabric. Snip your excess fabric, snip your excess threads, and now we've got something that looks a little bit like this. And if you're kind of confused what to do now, let me show you. We basically want to tuck this panel in, and it should automatically come out the other side. As you can see, the folds match. And right now you could hit this with an iron. And right now what we're going to do, as I said, don't stitch all the way to the line. And the reason I said that was because now you can finish that cut line to the stitch all the way around. And these are little notches that you're creating here, and you're creating them so you can sort of malleably move the fabric in the way that you want it to go. It's going to be easy for ironing it down in a minute. What we're going to do is we're going to take this now you've finished cutting. All your cut marks should be right up to the stitch, as I mentioned, and we're going to just hit the iron all the way down this, splitting these two panels apart. Now when you flip this over, you can see that we have a super nice seamless pocket. What we're going to do is we're going to just flip this panel over and hit this with a iron as well. So we should have something that looks a little bit like this. Now we can just flip it to see what it looks like. Iron any pieces which look a little bit off. And now what we're doing now is if you move your panels out the way, you can see that you've left this little gap here that can be stitched down to that bottom panel along that line. So I recommend getting a sort of small sewing foot, something that is just like a zipper foot, and you're slowly stitching all the way around this panel to the top. And what that does is that just closes up the inside of the pocket, because right now, as you can see, it's open. We're just closing up the inside of that pocket. Now we're looking at the main panel that I just added and showed you how to do that secret little pocket, so in the pattern I did a curved pocket, but unless you get that curve absolutely perfect, it is going to look a tiny bit off, just like mine here. So I'm either going to change the pattern piece on the actual pattern to just be like a five-sided shape with points. I just recommend to basically sew as careful as possible, because as you can see, it looks really good. It's just, it could be a little bit cleaner. Either way, I hope that has taught you something new. I think it looks really clean on there regardless. As you can see, I just added this welted pocket as well, and I'm going to reintroduce the other panels back in. So this right here follows the exact same curve as the curve on your center front. So this is folded in front facing, front sides together, stitched up at a 1/4 seam allowance, turned inside out. And you don't want to stitch this bottom bit right here. So obviously when this is placed front sides together, don't stitch along this bottom bit, just stitch down to the bottom. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get our hem front facing, and we're just going to place it on the bottom. Then you can see that it's hanging over the other front facing. What we're going to do to account for that is we're just going to grab some scissors, and again another 1/2 inch over, we're just going to cut it, and then you should be able to stitch them together with a 1/4 inch, and they should all line up. Once they do line up and you have stitched them together, then we can stitch all along the bottom. But until we get there, we can move this hem piece to the side. We're attaching the shoulder piece. We're doing again front facings, 1/4 inch, and then hit it with a top stitch. Then we should be at that point. I'm going to throw you on my head so you can see exactly what I'm doing. On the straight line of the center front facing, I'm just going to hit it with a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch press with the iron. One thing that I just forgot to mention is when you stitch all the way down that center front facing, then you just want to stitch across this too. So stitch that down as well. Now, so I can do this all at the same time, I have literally just cut a slit the same size as the folded hem facing. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew that together. Just like that, you can see that I have stitched the bottom hem to the center facing. What I can do is bring my normal panel back, and you can see it all fits nicely. Now what we're going to do, now these are together, is we're just going to stitch all the way down this bottom around the curve, and then just like I mentioned, we just want to cut in and sew just to the end. When you fold this inside out at the top, we want to make sure that we cut a little slit in this, because this is where the collar is going to run, and then this will kind of sit a little bit lower. Let me show you. Make sure you snip the corners before you turn it inside out. And now we want to turn this whole thing inside out. So you can see now that everything is ironed down. What we are going to do is, like I said, you can see this is naturally started to fold over now. So just to compensate for that, we're just going to cut a little slit in here. And then at the bottom, we're basically not going to top stitch any of this. We can do that later. So what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch from the bottom corner all the way up and around. And then we're just going to cut in and stitch just up here so it gets hidden in the collar. So start at the corner all the way up your center front. Make sure that it's ironed really nice. And we're going to stitch all the way just up here, and then we're just going to cut it in so the top stitch gets hidden. The next part of the process, as I mentioned, was to attach the shoulder. Again, 1/4 seam allowance, and then hit it with a top stitch. Just like that, you now have one of your front pieces finished and ready to stitch together. Again, I just want to make sure that you know you're not top stitching across this. The reason we're not is because we're matching up the hem and the side seam with the back side seam and the back hem facing. So leave that for now. So now we are pretty much just doing the exact same thing, but with the other front side. We're adding the shoulder on with a top stitch, and then we're also running the center front facing all the way down to the bottom, and then we are stitching it together with the hem panel also. So I'm just gonna cut the hem facing. Now you can sew these together. Now we can sew all of this together, turn it inside out, hit it with the top stitch, and then make sure you're not top stitching this bottom. And then then we'll have this side also ready. Now for this part, we're not stitching round that top piece. We're just going from the top and we're going all the way down and then around that bottom hem facing. Now we've sewn down that front facing, we're basically going to stitch all the way down, but again, remember, don't stitch along this line. That is your two front panels fully sewn together. So if we place this one over, you can see that that is exactly how this garment is going to sit, which is super, super nice. And we have also sewn the back panel. So we have all three main panels sewn of our garment. What is left to do is we have the collar and the sleeves right here. I'm going to take you through the sleeves because they're quite simple to do, and then we're going to do this collar in POV so you can fully understand it, and then it's literally just putting everything together. Right now we're going to focus on these two sleeve panels. What I have just done off camera is I have basically just front facing put the hem of the bottom of the shirt on, so the bottom hem of the shirt front facing. I've just placed them down and pinned them. We're going to do a 1/4 seam allowance stitch again, and then we are going to iron and then fold this edge and then basically just set it up the same way we've been doing it the whole tutorial. You can see that I just ironed down that seam allowance and that hem of your sleeve. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to unroll the sides, and then I'm basically just going to front facing match them up. And what we're going to do is we're just going to do that 1/4 seam allowance down, turn it inside out, top stitch it. And this will be your sleeve completed, and we're doing it on the other side too. So now we have done our stitch across, that 1/4 seam allowance stitch. I'm just going to make sure that that's in the middle, just like this, and then we're going to hit a press all the way down this seam.
Vince on the beat.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do 2 top stitches. Now I've turned it all inside out, back the way it was, with it all stitched together underneath. We're not going to top stitch this, we're just going to run 2 hem stitches, so one close to the edge and then one right on this edge. And this is going to clean up and close our arm sleeves.
Vince on the beat.
So it should look something along the lines of that. We're going to do the same to the other side now, and then we'll move on to the collar. We have just sewn these arm panels right here, these 2 little short sleeves, and now we are going to move on to the collar. You should have cut out 2 mirrored pieces of the main collar and 2 mirrored collar stands. And what I have done is I have just added a little bit of seam allowance onto this pattern piece, mainly because I kind of want mine to be a little bit bigger, and yeah, I kind of just want to test a little bit of a bigger collar. It shouldn't make too much difference on the actual final fit of the garment, so if you chose to do the same, then go for it. I'm going to throw you on POV on my head and pretty much just explain this all in POV, because I think it can get quite confusing. We're doing a collar with a collar stand. Some people don't know how to do that. They might be a tiny bit confused. So I'm just going to break exactly how to do this down. So yeah, just stick with me and we'll smash a collar with a stand. Right, so you should have your collar stand and then your main collar. Your main collar always sits on the curved top of the collar stand, and then this bottom of the collar attaches to the neckline. Once we unpin all of our pattern pieces, we're then looking at all of our fabric. We can move the collar stand to the side for the moment, and what we're doing with the main collar is we're running a stitch all the way around, but we're not stitching along this bottom line here. So we're running a stitch all the way around, and then we're going to turn inside out, press, and then top stitch the top collar. So that is what we're doing first. And then second, I will show you how to do the collar stand. But let's quickly do that. So again, stitch all the way up the side, up the top, and then all the way down, press, and then you can add a top stitch or 2 to the main collar. So to make turning the collar inside out a little bit easier, again, you can just snip these corners of where you have stitched off, Now we have pressed this collar, I'm just going to run a top stitch all the way around the edge of it. I'm going to do one that's kind of close, and then I'm going to hit another top stitch after, which is a sewing foot away. And then what we're going to do once we've done the top stitching is we're just going to sew really closely just to close this bottom part of your collar. So now we have sewn our top collar. I added a double top stitch on the actual collar itself because I think that's going to look really clean. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to exactly put together the collar stand. This is your collar stand. What you're going to do is we're basically looking at it from, well, let me flip it over. I've accidentally cut the fabric right on the edge of the actual fabric itself. So I'm just going to cut in and basically just do the same stitch all the way round. But what we're going to do is we're basically going to sandwich this collar inside these two, but you have to have the curves facing up. So when this is sandwiched, it's going to fit just like this. The curves of the collar stand, and then the collar itself is on this part. You used to have the curves on the top like that. But what I'm going to do before we do absolutely anything is I'm going to grab one of these panels, and like I said, I did it out of one heavier fabric and then one lighter. So I'm going to grab the lighter one, and I'm literally just going to run a 1/4 inch press all the way down the collar. And now you should have something looking a little bit like that on one side, and then we're not ironing the other one. I'll show you why in a minute. Now what we're going to do is we are just going to sandwich with our front facings, our collar right in the middle. So you can grab your panels again and you can lay them on top, and then you can find that exact center notch, just like that, and then mark it right on the bottom too. And then you can do the exact same thing for the actual collar itself. And then you can notch that center point right there. You can also measure this and then just mark the midpoint if you wanted to do that, but I'll show you why we've done this in a minute. We've marked the notches, and what we're going to do is we're just going to match up with the curves. Remember, at the top, we're going to match up that notch in the middle. And then we're just going to throw a pin in here. And now we're just doing the exact same thing, and we're placing the notches so it matches up perfectly. Now we want to hold this in place, take that pin out underneath, and we're just going to throw it right in the middle. So now we know that all these panels are connected up, perfectly matching. Now what we can do is we can run pins all the way along this and make sure that it is matched up. Make sure that all 3 pattern pieces are flush with the edge. So it should look something a little bit like this, where we have our collar sandwiched right in between our stand. One of the sides is folded, the bottom side isn't. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to stitch all the way along this top, round the curve to the bottom. What you can do is top stitch all along this edge right here, and then we'll attach it to the garment and start constructing the actual garment together. You don't have to do this top stitch though. Now what we're going to do is we're going to reintroduce all of our body panels now again, and we're going to stitch them to the garment and start building the structure of this wrapture out. The way I'm going to do this is the way I do it in every single tutorial, and that is pretty much to place the front facing of the front and the back together, making sure it's the front facing, and then we're just going to basically undo the hems, which you can see here, connect the hems up, connect the corners of the pit up, and then obviously sew the shoulders together. And then we're going to do the exact same thing to the other side and the other front panel. Once you have sewn all of that together, you want to hit them with top stitches to clean it up. And then we can start attaching the sleeves and the collar, and we're nearing finishing our shirt. I'm just going to show you how to do this with me doing it either POV, or I'm just going to put the camera around the room. But I'm kind of expecting you to kind of know this if you've got this far. Front facings together, and then we are stitching the front to the back, sort of closing up that shirt, and then we are connecting the sleeves and the collar, which I will show you. So now we have just sewn the two front panels to the back panel. We should be left with this really nice neckline here. Now we have attached all the pieces. You can see that you have your collar. We're going to reintroduce that. On one side of your collar, you should have the middle notch still indicated, and then you should have marked your center front back, which is this notch right here. We're looking at the top neckline, and what we're going to do is we're going to match up these two notches. So let me throw you into POV. To match up this notch on your collar with the center back notch right there. And then we're going to pin, and we're going to make sure we're not doing it with this folded sort of ironed press side. We're going to pin all the way around this. So we're going to pin all the way around that collar. And what you want to do whilst pinning this is you want to make sure that your collar actually reaches that little point there. And you just want to sort of place it so it looks a little bit like that. So the end of your collar slightly overlaps that little sort of notch that you cut then. And then you want to make sure that there is no sort of bubbles in the fabric, so there's no like pulling, and we're just going to keep adding pins until we feel like it's correct, which we're nearly there. But you're throwing your pins front facing on the side that isn't folded, and then we're going to do a 1/4 stitch all the way down here. Oh my God, the camera nearly fell and I caught it in my lap. Visually show you what I've done again right here. This collar stand slightly overlaps the end of one of your front pieces, and then the other front piece, it only goes up to as far as where you cut that notch earlier. And I did a 1/4 seam allowance stitched all the way across. And now what you can do is you can actually iron this down. So I'm just gonna hit the iron all the way across this. Now that is ironed, you can flip it round. And you can see we have this folded side here. This folded side is basically what it's pretty much gonna do. I'll try and show you right here. What it's pretty much going to do is this folded side that we folded is going to fold right just so it goes over that stitch line. And then once it's just over that stitch line there, we're going to place a pin. And as you can see, when you flip it, that pin sits right above the seam. So we're going to do that over and over again, all the way across this collar. Now we want to run a top stitch just all the way along where we've pinned. And I'm just going to clean up this little loose edge here by undoing a little bit of the top stitch. So I just filmed that whole process of putting in this sleeve, but it didn't actually record on the camera. So I'm going to show you how to do it on the other sleeve. Luckily, I still have one more to go. And then all we've pretty much got to do is finish off all the top stitching on the hems, and then it is to hardware. I've kind of just overlapped it wrong here, but it should be like that. And I said on the previous clip, but it didn't film. Finish off all of the top stitching, and then it is literally adding the metal hardware or buttons to the side right there. So let's do this sleeve. How would we do this? We turn the garment inside out, and you can see you've got the side seam right here of your garment. We're going to thread our sleeve through the garment, and we're just going to match up that bottom seam on the sleeve with the side seam on the actual garment itself. We're going to flip it round. I'm going to match up them seams, and I'm going to throw a pin in it right there. What you can do is you can throw pins all around this and just match up that edge, the edge of the sleeve cap with the armhole, and just throw pins around. But I feel pretty confident that everything is going to line up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start stitching around it. Now we have stitched that sleeve in, what you can do is you can turn it inside out, and you can see that it's now connected. Again, the super important thing is to make sure you connect the bottom of your sleeve, which if I show you there, this is the bottom of your sleeve. Connect that seam to your side seam of your garment. Now what we're going to do is we are going to top stitch all the way around it, and I mentioned it in the clip that didn't film, but I'm going to mention it again. There is no easy way of doing this unless you make the shirt in a whole different way. So just take it super slow. I'm running my top stitch towards the sleeve. And I'm just going to stitch along this. But as I'm stitching along, just take it super slow and pull out any unwanted fabric from below. You can press this to make it a little bit easier too. So once we have sewn that sleeve, you can see that it's fully top stitched down, which looks super nice. And now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the bottom of our shirt where we need to finish off our top stitching, and I'm just going to finish that off now. And right now, just for reference, we are top stitching all of that hem down that we left before because we needed to connect it up with the side seams and connect the front to the back. Just like that, you can now see that we have just finished the shirt. Look at that. And just like that, we have just finished the KAZE wrap shirt. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of roughly try it on now. And then I'm going to head somewhere. I've got to go to my family's home. And I'm going to edit this full video. And then I'm going to come back Thursday. The release date of this pattern is Friday. So when you're watching this, it should already be out. I'm basically going to go edit this whole video together. And then I'm going to come back, add the hardware and do the B-roll ready for me to add to the video. So let me show you briefly what it looks like. And this right here is the finished, or well, near finished. I haven't completed it yet. I've still got to add the hardware. But this is what it's looking like. I'm going to come back in a few days' time, give you a proper outro, and I'm going to finish this off with hardware and make it look super nice. Catch you in a little bit.
We couldn't discuss happened since years ago. And then you look at the things.
So, it is the day before the drop, and I've just come in to finish all the details on the KAZE wrap shirt. And the other day you saw me completely finish the Kiri wrap shirt, so both of these amazing patterns are fully completed now. And I'm so happy with them. I'm going to overlay some clips on the left and the right of both these patterns, and you can watch this flow by and be super happy because you've made one yourself. If you have made one yourself, I'd love to see what you've created, so you can private message me on Instagram, or you can join the community WhatsApp group chat, which is right here, which has 1,500 people that talk sewing every single day. If you haven't decided whether you want to make this pattern yet, then there is a 30% discount code right here, which will bring the pattern from $15.95, which is already down from $19.99. It'll bring it down to £11.60, which is almost half price of my original price of the patterns that I released. There's 5 uses. Use this code. Once the uses are done, then there won't be any more. And if you're also interested, I'm running a promotion on my Instagram too, so head over there. If it's the release date of this video, I'm still running it. If it's past the release date of the video, then I'm not running it anymore. Anyway, thank you for sticking with me on this long video. I hope you are enjoying these little flow-by photos and videos that are showcasing the pattern that we've just created. This is a perfect his and hers pattern for Christmas time. I'm dropping new patterns every Friday at 6 PM. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for supporting me. This has been an amazing sort of thing, and everyone getting involved and making all their different items, it is incredible to see. And to make a movement of people which are genuinely talking every day in our community WhatsApps, building the patterns, jumping into patterns for the first time, letting me help them understand patterns. It's an amazing thing. So I'm going to keep going with this. I appreciate you. Catch you next Friday at 6 PM. See you in a bit.